South Africa's economic performance in the first quarter of 2022 has been lauded as a good start to the year, but more risks still remain when it comes to economic growth targets for the country. What does the business sector have to say about the 1.9% growth in the economy in the first 3 months of the year? For that, we're joined by Mukoki, the CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. 1.9% GDP growth for the first 3 months of this year. That's indicative of an economy emerging from COVID-19 disruptions. But as your members are employers, what do you say as the business community about this performance which was announced today?
Well, I think that, Polani, good evening to you and your listeners as well. I think that it's a positive indicator because, as you'd appreciate, we've come through very treacherous times over the last 8 or so quarters. COVID didn't help, downgrades that we experienced in South Africa also complicated our growth trajectory. So any good news is good news. It's little. It's not going to make a very huge impact, but I think that it's a positive sign going forward if we have to maintain this. But it really means that we need to work on all the fundamental things that we need to do, restructuring things that we need to be able to do, make sure that we get people the skills that they need, building a platform effectively that can give us these numbers that ought to be consistent. 1.9 is very little, but we need to be able to expect things like 4 or 5% growth quarter to quarter or year to year over a much more longer period to deal with all the big problems that we're facing in South Africa.
I want us to get to what we need to do to actually achieve that high growth trajectory a little later. A lot of skepticism that I've found from many quarters when it comes to these Q1 numbers. It's about whether we can sustain this growth throughout 2022. What are your thoughts? Do you think South Africa can sustain this particular or this kind of growth?
Well, it depends. It depends on the fundamentals. It depends on the global markets. It depends on what we're able to do ourselves in terms of giving ourselves the fillip to boost the things that are necessary to drive that level of investment, to make sure that we're effective in doing the performance management that we need to do and invest in new industries and grow South Africa. And we're not going to be able to do that if we do not develop the skills. We've excluded the majority of the population from active economic participation where incomes can actually rise and job creation can be expanded. Because one of the mistakes that we should not actually make is to assume that we can maintain high levels of growth without rising incomes, without an increase in job opportunities or the opportunities, the platforms that can create that. So the first thing that we need to be able to do is to fix the infrastructure. We're experiencing significant problems. We're in a commodities boom, especially when it comes to things like coal, whatever the case might be. But if you look at the performance of our logistics infrastructure via Transnet, we're way down by millions and millions of tons. And so these things that are impacting, whether it's performance from Transnet, whether it's crime, and people damaging the infrastructure, we need to be very, very decisive around that. Economic crimes should be treated as well as though they're economic terrorism, because you can't have people uplifting a rail network or damaging the infrastructure around the ports, and then they're actually getting away with it because they can get 6 years in jail for that. So we need to be very resolute in terms of what we're going to do around that and act very decisively in a number of areas, including the development and the growth of the relevant skills, the technical skills that the economy needs. There's no quick fix. There is no such a thing as a 3-year solution for South Africa. We need to have a 20, 30-year solution on the table, which means we need to go back to the fundamentals so that we're not caught up in this short-termism of being excited about by a 1% or 2%. In the end, people need to have lives that are improving. We need to resolve the issue of unemployment. We need to reduce significantly the unemployment rate in South Africa, because when people are employed, people can grow the economy. People can buy. They can buy products. They can buy services. They can buy more data. They can buy cell phones. They can buy more irons. They can buy building material to improve their homes. But if they are not in a position to have the relevant skills from an educational point of view, then that's not actually going to happen over a longer period of time. So we've got a very significant, serious crisis in the area of education as we have now. So many young people who are hopeless, and some have to quit school at grade 10, and there is no clear sign of what's going to happen to them. So there are too many young people who are actually unemployed, and that is not a sustainable program for economic growth at all.
And for many of them sitting at home unemployed, facing higher and higher cost of living, these results and this data doesn't mean much to them. But something quite interesting when it comes to some of the sectors, particularly mining. Mining has not performed as expected, and we saw mining propping up the South African economy as those commodity prices, there was a boom during the height of COVID-19. Are you concerned about that? And of course, the good side is that the leisure sector seems to be in recovery.
Well, we're concerned about the numbers that are coming out of mining. Part of it is the lack of investment. Part of it is just too much concentration amongst a few hands that are in mining. Part of it is the level of investment that is required. No one is taking risk. You know, you can go get a mining, a prospecting right from the DMR tomorrow, but the state has not actually developed a financing mechanism that when you say I'm empowering these new black people with mining prospecting rights, how am I going to fund them? It costs a lot of money to dig up those holes, and so we're actually taking 2 steps forwards and then we take 5 steps backwards. So we need to deal with the issue of concentration, where there are many projects that can actually be successfully run, and we need to create the necessary conditions from a financing point of view, from a technology point of view, from an assistance point of view in terms of skills, the relevant skills that we need to be able to have so that the mining sector itself can actually increase. It's ridiculous that if you want to run a coal mine today, you want to export. There are so many orders for coal, by the way, but we don't have the infrastructure, both from a rail point of view. You want to take your stuff to RBCT, you can't get in because that particular place is largely dominated by the big major players. So South Africa needs to invest in the infrastructure around rail, because you can't be tracking things all the time, because it makes us very uncompetitive, and it renders many of the projects that would have been very successfully launched not to be successfully launched, because the economics just doesn't actually make any sense or add up. And you need to make sure that you've got a port infrastructure that is quick, that is relevant, with the right people, that is resourced correctly. These are all long-term plans, 20, 30 years. Go raise the $20, $30 billion that you need to have and invest in the right things and put in the right people around it. And then you start having more of a permanent program of sustainability around the mining sector, so that everyone can see that we've got a stake. So what is happening right now is that the few people who are there are happy, but we are actually not developing South Africa in terms of the potential that that mining sector is. And you get tired all the time to hear from those who are obviously the interest and role players complaining about regulation, when in fact it is not just regulation. It is also opening up that particular space so that so many people can participate very meaningfully to that. It doesn't make sense that it's only the majors that can actually do well. It also doesn't make sense for South Africa to only want to benefit from either a commodities price rise or a deteriorating rand-dollar exchange, because those give you 2 flips. One, you get better money because obviously, you know, you are getting more money by way of rand. But that's not necessarily a sustainable program. We need to be able to grow organically. We need to be able to sell products and sell it in global markets much more competitively than we can right now. And infrastructure and investment and technology are going to be central pieces that are going to enable us to do so.
Mr. Mukoki, let's leave it there for tonight. Plenty to talk about indeed, but Alan Mukoki, the Chief Executive at the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, quite stern on that we shouldn't be too excited about this good performance for the first quarter. It's what we do about the rest of the year and moving forward as a country in terms of policy implementation that is going to make a difference. Thank you very much for your time. Well, on that note,